Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sue Schaefer, and today I have Dr. Marsha Lichtenstein with me. Marsha teaches women how to ask what they're worth and how to get it. And she's dedicated 17 years to helping people resolve workplace and family conflicts. She has a doctorate in sociology from Rutgers University, and she's done postdoctoral work in dispute resolution at the University of Massachusetts. So thank you very much, Marsha, for joining us today, and I look forward to our chat.
Great. Thank you, Susan. I'm really excited about being here with you and celebrating the publication of the new book.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to ask, what are 3 ways to help couples say no with grace and ease to either family members or to potential suppliers or wedding professionals who they feel are pressuring them to do things that are really not in their heart or not what they feel they desire?
That's a great question, Susan, because when you're planning a wedding, everybody wants a little piece of you. I'm sure that you experienced that with the research you did for your book, and it's a time of celebration for you, but other people want to acknowledge and celebrate you also. They don't always know what the boundaries are, so it's up to you as the engaged couple to set those boundaries. And the most important tip that I want to start with is to really know what you want to say yes to. So I'm not going to start with the no. I'm going to start with advice to figure out what you really want and get your yeses all lined up. So there's a couple of steps to get there, but I'll go over them in a second.
Okay.
The second tip regarding getting your yeses together is working with your fiancé on what the two of you really want. This is something that should be fun, something you should really enjoy planning, and it's a chance to see how the two of you resolve your own differences. Just a heads up, this is an indicator of how you're going to go about buying a car, buying a house, planning a family. So it's a really, not only a fun time, but an important time to really manage those communication skills really well. So my first, to elaborate on the first tip, I would definitely go through your book and note all the different services and aspects of a wedding that you're going to need to negotiate. And for each one of those categories, you and your fiancé decide what you want that to look at. How do you want it to look? What is really important to you? And while there's many different pieces, and you may not want to touch on all of them, this is something you want to do in private. You don't want to have these discussions in public for the first time with family members or vendors around you. So take the time to sit down together and actually write down what is of most importance to you. I would also say prioritize. What are the top 5 things you want to see happen on that day? You want to have a great time. You want to feel celebrated. You want to be relaxed. What do you need to make that the day that you want? So have 5 priorities and write them down. Then, I love this, when you know what your yeses are, it is so much easier to say no. So in a way, those are like my first 2 tips rolled into one.
Okay.
Your fiance work together, and together iron out your differences in private. Don't do that in public. Then when you go to the vendors or you meet with your parents, you're a united front. It's a great way to get your marriage off to a start. Then have everything written down and have that list. Now, just because you've prepared and you have that list doesn't mean everyone's going to respect that, because parents, vendors have their own ideas about what's important for a wedding. So let's look at some real concrete ways to say no that lets you stay gracious, friendly, and composed. Many people, especially women, feel that they need to say yes to everyone. And when you're planning a wedding and you're kind of stressed, there's so many things to deal with, there's a lot of people, you don't want to forget anything. If you have the habit of being someone who says yes automatically, that habit's going to pop up when you're stressed out. So while you may not be totally ready to say no clearly, I like to use this little strategy. I call it buying time. And the way it works is this. Someone will make a request. Maybe someone has some guests they want to add to your list. And you don't want it, but you don't want to be impolite, and there's so much else on your plate. So I give you permission to take a step back and say, let me get back to you on that. That is a phrase you should memorize if you're one of those people, male or female, who have a habit of automatically saying yes because you want to be nice. Now, of course, you want to be nice, and you want to have everyone sort of on your team for the wedding. And if you want to have a breather, and I suggest memorizing this phrase, let me get back to you on that. Just let me get back to you. Then you can back off, talk with your partner, evaluate the request, and then give a clear answer when you're not feeling pressured. So that's number one in terms of how to go about managing the pressure that you get, especially from family. I'm thinking about a recent wedding. A friend of mine was having a wedding, and she has two sisters, and they each have daughters, and the sisters wanted all their daughters to be bridesmaids. They made five flower girls. And this friend getting married didn't want any flower girls. It wasn't even on her radar to have a flower girl. And so she was like, oh my God. And she was able to say, well, let me get back to you on that. And that way, once she could get a little more composed, instead of being blindsided, she was able to talk to her sisters and work out something that was much better than a quick, what, are you crazy kind of response. So just remember that phrase if you're one of those automatic yes sayers. Let me get back to you. Here's another suggestion I have, and this is kind of a mindset. When someone asks you to do something, whether it's have flower girls at your wedding or have a different, more expensive dish that for the food, making suggestions for more elaborate flower arrangements, just remember they're making a request. And when someone makes a request, you have different ways of responding. You can say yes, you can say no, or you can say no with some options. So perhaps the suggestion isn't off the wall. Maybe you'd like to consider it. You can say, not exactly that, but here's a counter offer. Now, you don't use that language. That's a negotiation term, counter offer. But being able to say, no, but how about X, and I'll give you an example in a minute, is a way of honoring the relationship, acknowledging the person, remaining gracious, but also maintaining your boundary, which is something you're really going to need to do during this phase of planning your wedding, right? So this is a very common situation. It's kind of funny in a way, but here you are, you have your guest list, and you have everything set up, and you know who's coming, and all of a sudden your parents discover some long-lost relatives that they must invite to your wedding. That could be kind of touchy, right? Because they want to celebrate, they're excited, they want their friends, they want these long-lost relatives to be there, but maybe it won't work for you. Maybe you're paying for the wedding and you can't accommodate more guests, more expenses. So how about, this isn't a good time for us to expand our budget, but how about if when we come home from the honeymoon, you have a reception and we'll be relaxed and we can meet with them and have a really lovely time. So instead of just shutting out the suggestion totally, here's a way of including them, but more on your terms.
It's an excellent example.
So let's definitely remember we don't want to alienate our relatives and friends or even our vendors because we're relying on them, and we don't want to lose our priorities. And here's the time to keep reviewing that list of priorities. What's important to me? And often the financial part's important, so you can't just keep adding people to who's going to show up for the whole ceremony and reception. But yeah, thanks. I think that is one of those tips that can come in handy beyond the wedding day.
Yes, very much so.
Many other negotiations. And here's another, I'll give you one more tip about, especially for dealing with vendors. It's my suggestion that you prepare yourself to say no. Just assume that you are going to have to say no. And let's face it, a lot of people, men and women, don't like to just say directly no, because they feel like they might be rude, they might be too loud. And how can you be prepared to say no and still be friendly, kind, gracious, and maintain these relationships with people that you're either depending on or people you're going to see the rest of your life, like your family? And I'm a big one on practice. If you've read my blogs or had any kind of classes with me, I advocate practice. And here's one of those areas for practicing. I call this have a default no. Sometimes I call it your pocket veto. So have this default phrase that you have memorized. And when you're feeling very pressured, you can just let it roll off your tongue as easily as saying, please pass the salt. It doesn't take long to memorize these phrases. Maybe a vendor's pressuring you. They want you to just buy more of what they're selling. Why not? They're in business too. They want to, and they also feel they've had experience. A lot of vendors are also not just trying to make money, but they want you to have the best experience possible. But you know what's right for you. You know your limits. And you can stand up for yourself and still be friendly. So if you're comfortable saying no, you can be gracious. It's when you're nervous and uncomfortable that the rough edges come out. That's why I'm advocating a practice session. Say it over and over until it just rolls right off your tongue. And these phrases are really simple. I'll give you 3 options, okay? And if for the folks that are listening to us, I'd say just pick one and write it down and practice it. So you're almost feeling like it's how you normally speak, right? Here's an example. Someone wants to, you need more flower arrangements. You need bigger flower arrangements on every table. Well, that doesn't work for me. That's friendly, that's kind, it's direct.
Yeah. It's definitely not disrespectful of the other person either, because you're saying what it is that's important to you.
It's totally about you. It has nothing to do with rejecting their ideas, suggestion. Oh, that doesn't work for me. Another way to say that is, oh, I'm not interested. And then, of course, there's just no thanks. That takes a little more practice for most people. But when you get that, you'll realize that it's not disrespectful. In fact, you're saving that person a lot of time. If you're waffling and you're not clear, they'll keep talking and they're wasting their time because you already know you don't want that. So it's actually nicer, friendlier, and more respectful just to say no quickly than to let the discussion drag out where you already know what your answer is going to be. And in fact, if you can be brief, short, and sweet, that is the most respectful way to say no, especially to vendors, but even to family. Once you start explaining everything, people don't even hear your no. You lose
That's an excellent point. They get lost in the weeds.
Totally lost. So those are my tips for how to handle setting boundaries and having the opportunity to really celebrate what's important to you.
Those are excellent. Find you?
Can you hear me? If you have any questions or...
where could people find your blog? Because it's an excellent blog.
So this is the website. It's www.womennegotiate, and that's one word with 2 N's, .com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marsha.
Okay, Susan.
I
And
appreciate your time and your wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you.
I appreciate your book. I think it's going to be a fantastic resource for couples that are planning weddings. So congratulations again.
Thank you.